Welcome to Lightbox Online. This is the DeviantArt Personal Work to Paid Work panel. My name is Justin Malla. I am the Chief Creative at DeviantArt and a digital artist. I'm very excited to introduce you to my panelists. DJ, why don't you kick us off? Who are you and what do you do?
I'm DJ Welch. I'm the art lead at Twitter right now, working to help out in the camera team, to help out on their new stuff there. I've been doing concept art for maybe like 11 years now, and looking forward to this panel.
Amazing. Claire, tell us a bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm Claire Hummel. I'm currently an artist at Valve. I joined with the Campo Santo team working on In the Valley of Gods, and we just shipped Half-Life Alyx. I've been in the games industry for about 10 years, worked on Bioshock Infinite, Westworld VR at HBO, and a bunch of much smaller, worse projects. So.
Amazing. RJ, take us home.
And I'm the youngest one here, so I have the least experience. I started doing concept art professionally about like 7 or 8 years ago. I'm most well known for my realistic Pokemon, and I worked on Detective Pikachu.
Wonderful. So in this panel today, the four of us are going to be discussing personal work. The work that we make for ourselves in our own time for our own reasons and where it leads in our career, the opportunities that it opens up and the things that we learn and take away from it. So I think an intelligent place to start is to just ask, what's your first personal project of substance? Like the first time that you decided to really do something with a defined outcome and parameters instead of just randomly practicing. First one in gets a Snickers.
Oh, yeah, I'll go first. Yeah, the first project I did was kind of like in school, they weren't using digital tools yet. So I was learning Photoshop on my own after school. And I was like, well, I like Avatar, so maybe I'll age up their characters and just kind of do a concept exploration on that. And that was like a pretty big project for me.
By Avatar, you mean James Cameron's Avatar, right?
Yes, Avatar Last Airbender. Yeah, Avatar Last Airbender. Make the old blue Na'vi characters even bigger and older. But yeah, so it was Avatar Last Airbender characters I was aging up because I got into the series, I think, right after it ended. So like, oh, I wish there was more. Let's keep going.
Yeah, I had I've always been like really project focused. Just like in high school, I was wanted to make my own like video game, right? Like a big JRPG, which of course is like the most complicated game a person can make. And I was like 14 and had no idea. But in art, like when I first got into college, I started doing like Kingdom Hearts versions of other pop culture video game characters. And they're terrible now. Don't look them up. But like that was like one of my first sort of like really goal-oriented projects to like have like a consistent style and like visual through line.
It's hard to place for me. I think like RJ, I was very project based as a kid. My dad worked in animation, so I was always like, I'm going to be a commercial artist when I grow up.
Oh,
and
lucky.
so yeah, for better.
I didn't even know it was a thing until I went to art school.
I was very spoiled. So like I have memories of like going to the office with dad and just like paging through Prince of Egypt model sheets and just being like, I'm gonna draw characters for this and they're gonna put it in the movie, I say, as like a 9-year-old. And so nice. I'd put together these full books with like just terribly drawn turnarounds of a cat character for Ramses. And I was just so, the confidence of being that young and that stupid. I was so convinced that it would actually go into the movie.
And yet, all of you have examples of a project with a scope that ambitious that did result in exactly that. I'm looking at you, RJ.
Yeah. Yeah. So when I was like 22, I started doing realistic Pokemon. Like all through art school, I was like, hey, I'm going to be a human character designer. It just never really clicked for me until I started doing more monsters. And then once I like got this realistic Pokemon idea, people seemed to really like it. So I kept doing more, and it sort of like led me to every career opportunity, including getting to work on Detective Pikachu. So that was a pretty cool experience, like the best possible conclusion out of drawing some fan art.
Well, I mean, that's one-to-one. But DJ and Claire, I know you guys have ones that are similar to that, right?
Yeah, I feel like mine's a little a little in that same vein, where it's very much like, you are good at this thing, come do this thing on our project, which was, I did this series of, I called them historically accurate Disney princesses. Now I would call them historically accurate-ish Disney princesses, because my sister was working at Colonial Williamsburg, and so I was spending all of this time around people in historical costuming, and I just completely fell into it. And then when Bioshock Infinite got announced, I remember seeing the trailer and privately doing little draw-overs of Elizabeth's outfit to make it more historically accurate. And then, totally unrelated to that, they saw my historical princesses and reached out to me to design young Elizabeth and the Lutece twins, because they wanted a historical eye for it. So it was really neat to see that, like, the fact that it was fan art was the hook, but what they took away from it was the passion for design and for historical fashion, and bringing that on to their project, which was super fun.
DJ, what you got for us? Anything like clothes?
So mine was a little weird. Like, those avatar drawings I did, they got pretty popular online, and then I was going around to conventions and selling my artwork, and I found out Cartoon Network was doing a portfolio review, I think at Anime Expo in 2009. And I didn't have a portfolio at the time. I just threw my pictures in there and then ran over to the portfolio review, and they're like, "We love this. You want to be an intern, storyboard intern on a couple shows?" And I was like, yeah. The shows I was on were Fire Breather and Adventure Time Season 1.
Holy heck.
Wow.
Yeah, that's
awesome.
pretty cool.
There you go. So look, the coolest sort of like tenet that we have in this panel is that these personal projects can and will, like, if pursued enough and if enough application is put into them over time, lead to bigger opportunities. Like, I know you all just gave an example of that being true, but is that something you fundamentally believe in? Like, is it that direct of a corollary, or do you think it's a little bit more nuanced than that?
I mean,
I think anytime, you have like a passion for something, and like, you get really into it, I think people can tell, and people want to pay you for passion. So I think like having fan art, like, getting really into somebody else's IP, like, is a good example to show, like, a would-be art director to hire you, be like, hey, I can tell this person gets into stuff that they didn't create. Like, maybe they'll get into the thing that we want to hire them for.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, not only that, like, I remember when I was going to school, people were like, don't do other people's characters, don't do other IPs. And I'm like, what do you think art directors and producers are looking for? They want to see that you can already they don't want to hire you and then have to teach you how to do it. If you already can do it, it's much easier to just slot you into that job.
Yeah, like, doing fan art, I feel like, is proving that you can play around in someone else's sandbox, and that is a very specific skill set. I know tons of artists who do their own IPs and their own work who would hate working in a studio environment, and fan art just puts you up for that, gives you those expectations of knowing the box you're working within, knowing the parameters and how to play around with that and expand on it. And as RJ said, it's just that passion, I think, stands out to people. Like, I have seen so many artists bring portfolios to me where I'm like, I know the exact studios you're looking at, that you are desperately trying to make art that fits into what they are trying to do, instead of just being like, know what the jobs entail, but draw what you love, draw what you're passionate about, whether that's fan art, whether that's personal projects, whether that's auto-bio. Like, that passion always comes through. And I think when people are hiring, it makes more of an impact than you think.
Well, by that same token, you want to, it's really easy to tell when somebody like they're just doing what's already been done. It's like, if you're going to do fan art or something, don't do what already exists. Like, bring your own personality and interest into it. And then I think that's what people sort of like latch on to. Anybody can just draw a Pokemon, but like, if you draw them with an interesting idea, like, that's what people are going to gravitate towards.
Yeah.
Passion meets originality is where you really get the fireworks that can, set something off, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's stay with passion for a minute, because I think that that's really important, and I think that's what's so valuable about these personal projects. But I think that the passions evolve over time, specifically as they pertain to subject matter. I think as creative people, the desire to create seldom dims, but I think that, like, your interests and the avenues that they take change over time, and your passions change. So you guys have all spoken, like, in, at a little bit of length already, about the passion you had for existing IP and existing things. Have you found over time that that's strengthened? moved adjacent or moved towards creating more original or historical based stuff? Like, what's your evolution been from a passion perspective?
I think you have to like rekindle your passion over and over again when you're sticking with the same subject. I've gone through ebbs and flows with my passion of art, where you get to a place where like, I want to do something else, I want to do something different. I found tricks for myself to like get back into that passion by returning to what kind of got me interested in doing art in the first place. But for myself, it's I kind of like switch my hyper focus onto something else. Like I want to learn script writing, or I want to learn storyboarding, or I want to learn directing, but it's all still within that creative realm for myself, at least.
I mean, for me, I don't feel like I'm that good at art yet, so I'm hyper focused on just wanting to do the one thing and get good at the one thing.
You're plenty good, man.
I mean, people say that, but like, you know, there's so many kinds of animals out there, and I want to be able to draw them all like really good. I can draw them okay, but you know, it's like it's one step at a time. Like the fun thing about creatures as opposed to doing like human characters is like you're never going to be out of subjects to draw, and it takes me so goddamn long to draw just one thing that like I have so many ideas I'm never going to get to, so I'm never like out of that passion because there's always the next project I want to be working on while I'm spending 50 hours on this one project.
I'm glad we all still think we're bad artists, even though we're close to a decade into doing it.
I feel like art needs so much more time than a lot of other skills to like get good at.
Yeah.
Like, that 10,000 hours is not applied to art at all.
How many times have we done 10,000? You know, I joined DeviantArt over 19 years ago now. That's crazy. Wow. I've done my 10,000 hours so many times. I don't think 10,000 hours anywhere near enough.
Yeah.
No. Sorry, Claire, we didn't get to hear about your interest evolution, if you have, or we can just move on.
I think my interests sort of transform. I have a lot of non-art interests that then just feed into my art, which is a thing I recommend to artists all the time, is don't just spend all your time stuck in those insular art communities. Like read, get passions about science and history, whatever else. So like I grew up as a kid loving dinosaurs and Egypt and the Old West and all of this stuff that has evolved and morphed over time into much more like critical and thoughtful interests in the same topics. So just finding new depths and new perspectives on things that I loved as a kid and finding ways to integrate that into my work and to engage with it differently. Because I mean, we're all still the same people we were when we were younger, but you're just evolving and kind of shifting that perspective. So
definitely. I think there's real value as well in getting back into the beginner mindset. DJ, I'm the same as you. Like I tend to pivot to other mediums altogether when I get burnt out on creating visual art, hence all the guitars in the background. I'm terrible at guitar, but like I'm really enjoying being terrible again. It's really wonderful having no stakes to something that I'm creating after a lifetime being spent where everything I make needs to have a certain amount of value. And so that's what's
falling in love with that uncomfortability is a good thing to do.
Yes.
I'm always changing careers. Like people look at my resume like, wait, you're a storyboarder, concept artist, you work in AR, VR? What do you do? Like I just work in ideation, and drawing well helps me with that.
Yeah.
So I guess what I wanted to ask was like, I should have lost track of what I wanted to ask. I had a great follow-on question from the beginner mindset thing and changing tax.
Enjoying yes. Other things.
Here we go. What I was going to ask is that, as you evolve throughout your career and you get away from that beginner mindset and into a position where everything that you make does need to provide some kind of a value, has it changed your relationship with your personal work? Do you view your personal work as something that you need to capitalize on, or do you view it more as just something that enriches you and your creativity?
I mean, yes. Like for me anyways, like everything I draw, like there's in the back of your mind, you're like, oh, I need to be able to make money from this somehow, right? It's like even like I'm lucky that like a lot of my personal interests have like translated into being like profitable. So I can like draw my dinosaurs and like the stuff that I get like really into, and people will be like, this is still good, I'm going to give you money for something. So I got fortunate there, but it sucks. Like there's everything that I want to draw, I have to have that in mind. Otherwise, it's just like, well, that was a waste of a week. Like, I'm happier, but like, did I make any money?
I feel like that is a hard trade-off, and one that I want to get better about. Is I truly miss the days of being in high school and just trading sketchbooks back and forth with friends, and not doing it for any reason other than that drawing was fun, and it was fun showing it to a small curated selection of people. And now as an adult, just every line I put to paper, I'm so hyper aware of being like, is this a waste of time? Instead of being like, no, just making art is important. You're stretching those muscles. It's just invigorating as a human being to make art. And so I'm really trying to pump the brakes on that, in terms of, like, I love going out and doing plein air drawings of rocks, and then I get home and I'm immediately like, well, maybe I could collect them into a book and publish it, instead of just like being in the moment and enjoying it for what it is. So
that's a tough one. I hit that wall probably like 6 years into my art career, where I was like looking at everything as a project, everything for money, everything for the amount of likes or views, or it was very transactional. And that's what kind of made me kind of look outside of art for things like acting or doing something else. Like, heck, the thing behind me right now is this is the backdrop of a video gaming channel I started last year. Like, I think like it's really important to consume and do a lot of different things beyond just art and art communities, to kind of keep it going and keep your mind from like focusing too much on being like, this drawing is for this project, this drawing is for the likes or my audience to grow. Because I get very unhappy when I find, like, when I get in those places where I'm like, okay, this piece I did this well, got me this many followers, and it just becomes way too transactional for me.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Well, let's delve into that a little more deeply, because, nearly every artist, I think, is very aware of the reception that their work gets. I'd say that there's a few people out there who are enlightened enough to operate in a way where they create and release and don't monitor the reception. I'm not one of them. Do that. I care, and I check. But I want to ask you guys how much it impacts what you create and how actively you work to either like enrich that and pander towards that to grow the audience and to grow the business opportunities, or actively move away from that and just remember to make your own work. I don't think there's a wrong approach there either, by the way. There's validity to both. It's a difficult choice.
I'm in the actively trying not to right now. Like, I post and run. I also don't often post on social media as much as I used to back in the day when I was growing my audiences. I'm really focusing on creating my own projects and getting my own projects and shows made. So hopefully, it's like winning the lottery, but that's what I want to focus on right now.
You're reaching that point of enlightenment that I can hear.
Maybe.
I'm hoping that my trajectory is going in that same direction. I'm not sure how well I'm acting on it. But as DJ was saying, I would find that same feeling of things getting so transactional and just being hyper aware of if I'm posting too much or not enough, or if I say anything on main, how people are going to take it. And just, so I've turned into just this emotionless void on my main Twitter that occasionally posts art. But I've also picked up other hobbies and started some longer term projects that just can't be shared as immediately or shared to a small group of friends. And it feels so good and freeing to just be like, oh, I can just run it by trusted artists who I know and get feedback, and I don't have to constantly be monitoring the potential.
Can I ask you a question? Is it weird for you, like you post on social media and you get like thousands of likes on a drawing, but then you draw something that's like you care much more about, and you show it to like 3 or 4 of your art friends that you really care about their opinions, and they like talk about it. I'm so much more excited about seeing their comments.
So much better. Yeah. So much better. Oh, when I post something on private and I get like 2 comments from friends about how they like it, I was like, this will sustain me forever.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it was like in high school, right? Like you just, you show like your 5 friends, and like, you get feedback from them, and if they like it, like you're doing a good job. But now it's like, if you get 10,000 likes, like you're doing a good job. So
yeah,
it's
and then if you don't get 10,000 likes, you feel bad, and you're like, why did I get this? I don't want this feeling. I don't want to carry this emotional baggage every time I post. It's horrible.
Maybe I'm a bad artist now. Just
Yeah.
tanked.
Yeah.
So, like, diving back a little closer to the bone of this conversation, like, is there an instance you guys can think of a project you did that left you with a skill that ended up being pivotal for other projects moving forward, for paid projects? Like, I know for myself, I did a year-long project once and came up with the geometric style that I've used in nearly every client project that I've done since. Had I not done that year-long project, I couldn't even give you the client list I wouldn't have.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Do you guys have examples of that?
Sure, like every project I work on. Like, I mean, the big one for me was probably, a couple years ago, I spent like a year reconstructing a T-Rex, like going through like every single muscle that I could, like reading like 22 scientific papers. But through that project, like it completely reshaped my understanding of like, dinosaur anatomy, and therefore I can bring that into dragons and fucking like everything else. So it's just like that was a very rough year working on that thing, but it's also like paid off, and like so many projects now are like so much faster because I know exactly the anatomy and where it's supposed to go now, and like that's become a shortcut for me.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, I mean, like every project, I think, not every, but there's definitely certain big ones for me that like taught me my cell shading style, taught me my rendering style, that taught me how I like to handle backgrounds, what shots I like to use to tell what type of emotion or the type of storytelling element. But this is a personal question, RJ. I do want to see what your interpretation of like an accurate T-Rex looks like as opposed to just the like
Sure.
a scaled one that you always see in movies. But I think you have something probably
so
pretty different.
Fat. It's so
yeah,
fat.
it's chunky. No, you can see it on my website or whatever. So I made it for an indie game I work on called Saurian, which is like, it's all about doing the scientifically accurate dinosaurs for one specific ecosystem, and T-Rex is part of that. So I got to like, through that project, I've made many like paleontologist contacts, and so that's
awesome,
like, man. I was able to like, talk to them and pick their brain for the whole thing. So like technically, I guess it counts as peer reviewed. But yeah, so right now T-Rex is probably scaly, and if it had feathers, it would have been like an elephant, just like a few, sporadic feathers, like hair.
Mm-hmm. I feel like for me, a lot of my personal projects are pretty different from my professional work, since most of my professional work is concept art, which is a lot looser and rougher. But I think doing the plein air rock studies was something that really gave me a very specific line language and hatching language that I then turned into reaching out to 59 Parks, which is the screen printed poster series, and doing a couple posters for them. And that process of doing posters for them and doing my own separations was what got Mondo's attention to do a Jurassic Park poster for them. And so that sort of like learning on the job and using projects to get better at things and push yourself further will definitely get you gigs further down the line, which is great.
Also, can I just say, Claire, that the way you draw rocks makes me very insecure about the rocks in my own paintings.
Oh, thank you.
And I have to like put a little bit more effort in, even though I don't know shit about rocks.
Well, I was drawing that Utah Ceratops in the Jurassic Park thing. I changed it and made a Utah Ceratops. And the whole time I was like, I hope RJ likes this skeleton.
It turned out well. You did a good job.
The Mutual Admiration Society here is wonderful. I love your rocks. I love your skeleton.
That's how it goes. I have long since accepted that I can't become the best artist at everything, and it's very freeing to just kind of revel in the work of your friends and all the good stuff they do. So
I don't believe you. I think you are one of the best artists at everything.
So I'm going to imagine that a lot of people who tuned in to watch a panel called Personal Work to Paid Work are going to be students and younger people who are looking to move into the sort of career spaces that you guys have now. Do you have any advice or anything that you would recommend them to do? Would you be like, draw every day for a month, or just do this, or just do that? Like for myself, I would say if the idea of making a piece every day for a year doesn't make you feel nauseous, you should totally try and do it.
I think it really depends on the artist you're talking to, like when you're giving a portfolio review. Some people you meet and they're just having a tough time getting their foot in the door and they're ready to. Some people still need to keep working on their craft a little more before they can jump in there and fill a junior position. But I usually give artists, before the Rona attacked, I would tell them to go to conventions. You meet so many good artists, so many art directors are going there, try and have a table. That really is a great step for finding your voice and also getting your work in front of people and meeting other artists who are in the industry who can help you get that first job.
And it's very humbling in a really good way to just sit behind a table and just be like, this is it. I am here by my own hand if I succeed or fail. And it forces you to talk to a bunch of strangers and sell your work. And it's a lot, but it's very good.
I mean, for me,
I was just going to say that I don't draw every day, so I feel bad giving that advice to younger students. But I did draw every day probably when I was younger. I think draw every day, if I would translate that advice into just allowing yourself to draw, as we've been saying, in ways that aren't for anything, that are just putting marks on paper that are loosening up your hand, especially before a work day, because the number of times where I've just gotten a slow start to my workday because I was trying to just start cold on a piece for work instead of just letting myself revel in being in Photoshop for an hour or so, I think is really important. And do master studies, look at artists outside of your field. It's very obvious when I see portfolios for concept art and they're just looking at ArtStation, or for animation, we're just looking at animation artists. It's like they already have Brittany Lee, they already have Corey Loftus, they don't need a second one. Yeah.
Or when they look at DeviantArt, just saying. RJ.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things that I see a lot, especially on like, social media right now, is so many, like young artists, like 18, 19 years old, are ready. They want to be, making money. So they put out a price sheet and now that turns their art into like, a Burger King menu, right? It's like, this is the products that they have. This is the skills that they have right now. This is what you have to expect from them. So like, instead of creating, like challenging themselves and like experimenting and creating like, new interesting pieces where, they have the opportunity to fail, instead they're expected to create like, a predetermined product. And that like leads to so many artists to stagnate. Like I know like all these like, 26, 27-year-olds who've just been drawing like the same shit for like 10 years because like that's all they've, been expected to draw. They've never like had to push themselves. Instead of like, making $50 for a character, they could be making like $2,000 for a character. And they just never like had that opportunity.
It's interesting that you place it on that, that system, that they get complacent with that menu that they've made, and it really locks them into that headshot, bust shot, full body kind of thing, and you're like, that's your life now.
Line work, color, fully rendered,
background,
no background.
And it's like the same thing with Patreon.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I was just talking with a buddy on Twitter like a couple days ago about this, that it's hard to shift as an artist in the days of social media, because suddenly people are following you for a specific thing. And if you get passionate about something new, you risk losing followers, you risk people being super rude and calling you out and saying they liked your older art better. And so just allowing yourself to not see as much value in that and just grow as an artist regardless of what your specific audience is during that transition period.
It's like trying to stop a train and like reroute it in a different direction. Like you're going in this one path and you have all these people like giving you momentum and you're like, oops, never mind. I don't want to draw that anymore. And now you're going to have to like build up that momentum again in a different path.
I think that's one thing I'm really jealous of, is creative people I see whose audiences are really accepting of their multidisciplinary ways and don't have this strong expectation of one outcome. I know that when I share stuff that's not like specifically aligned with exactly what my audience is expecting to see, there's a real visceral reaction to it, insofar as that it's not much of a reaction to it.
Yeah.
You almost have to train your audience to like expect that from you. Like I always said, like
curveballs all the time.
Yeah, I always said like a good way to get people into your, like, this was back in the day, but it's not a new concept anymore. But when I was coming up with it, like I would always say like, do 2 fan arts, 1 original. And you just kind of keep that system going until you can just do all original art, if that's what you're really looking for. But you can kind of keep your audience engaged, giving them the thing they really want to see, but then kind of getting them trained and interested in seeing something else outside of just that fan art stuff that you were a part of that fandom.
Yeah.
If you do that for long enough, they'll just watch you play video games.
Yes.
Turns out.
Any video game you want, doesn't even have to be new ones.
Follow the Ego Raptor path.
Yeah.
So I think an interesting thing to touch on might be, we've seen a real seismic shift, I would say in the last 5 years or so, that's really empowered creators in a way that we haven't seen before. It's come through streaming, and it's come through communities and social media. But another way to look at like going from personal work to paid work is to monetize your personal work. But I feel like there's been a way that you've been able to do it recently where even your process can be monetized as people tune in to watch you create and watch you learn and do all of that. I know personally speaking, like my advice to like an artist who is coming up now would be to consider building out your content reach as well as just like that finished product. Do you guys think is this a bubble, or is this the kind of thing that we're going to see like have legitimacy and legs moving forward?
I think in the same way that I remember excitedly downloading tutorials from DeviantArt like 14 years ago or something, I think there's always going to be an appeal to that. And I don't think you can force your way into it. I'm definitely not as inclined to it as I have my friend Justin Oaksford and my buddy Nick Cole are both people who are just born instructors, and they just love sharing process, and they love giving feedback, and they are not anxious about it at all. And so I think if that's something that someone comes naturally to, then it's absolutely an option. Like I buy things often on Gumroad that I already know how to do, but I just want to see how someone else talks through it. I want to see their specific Photoshop process, because we're all just using this weird ancient hacked together program that has a million ways to do the same thing. So
I mean, do you guys find that like I don't know, most of my art friends are more excited about buying books that show sketchy stuff, unfinished works from real artists that we love, than the finished art pieces? Like it's like it's almost like deconstructing how they did stuff, and I find that I've always found that more interesting than just buying like a finished poster or a print.
Yeah, it's like buying a cookbook instead of a book of like photos of food.
Yeah, there's something about seeing into someone's headspace and seeing the sketch work. It's just really gratifying.
Where do they start? Did they start off on the face or the hands? Or
yeah.
Do they start off with the leg? Like, what are they doing? When they're drawing a background, do they do perspective lines? Do they just freehand it, or what are they doing?
Does awesome their art look bad for a while before it looks good, like the rest
of
us?
All right, there's a question for you guys. Does your art look bad before it looks good? Because mine looks bad until it looks good.
Oh yeah. I mean, it just like goes, it'll be like, oh, the sketch gets finalized and it looks great, and then I start flatting or something, it looks terrible again.
You know, I feel like a client project, they ask for a check-in like 4 days before it's due, and you're like, you don't want to see it.
You don't want
Feel your money's been well spent.
Yeah,
that
you
is
gotta turn off all the bad layers.
That is the thing that terrifies me about doing live streaming, is like, oh no, people will see how terrible my art looks in the process. Like, at least if it's a sped up video, then it kind of gets swept under the rug. But my God, live art is ugly.
There's bravery to that for sure. All right, so we sort of covered the way that passions evolve over time, but the goalposts kind of move over time as well, right? And for me, I don't think that the corollary between the personal work and the paid work changes. I think that demonstrating you can do something and do it at an extremely high level still translates even when your like goals of what you want to do level up. Like for DJ, I know that it's making, you know, perhaps producing your own show at a high level, which is might be the reason you're doing a personal project where you're making a show in a more contained, self-produced kind of a way, right?
Mine ended up just, I started off with pitching and going for the hard way first, and now I'm going back the other route where it's like getting it farther along and then going back to the studios after you build up an even larger audience.
Right, but there's still that personal project going, and then you're going to go and do that. So where are you? I mean, that's DJ, you have your answer, I guess, but like, feel free to go into more detail on it. Like, what are you guys trying to work towards now, and what are you doing personally to get there?
I mean, I have like a ton of personal projects at all times that are never going to be finished, but I'd like them to be finished. Like, you know, I want to make, you know, like what DJ's doing. Like, I want to have like my own IP that's like, you know, fully like, you know, an extension of like my ideas and like my, you know, everything that I've learned. So I'm like inching towards that, but then, you know, a cool gig comes along. It's like, whoops, I'm going to do that instead. Like,
Yeah, I feel like I have no shortage of theoretical personal projects, and the problem with those is that ideas are only so special, and so if you sit on it for long enough, someone's going to come along and stomp on it and do it, and it doesn't matter if you would have done it better, they will do it first. And so learning to be okay with that. I think having the full-time day job at Valve makes it very hard to come home and invest into personal projects. But also I just get that same anxiety around sharing in social media just suddenly freezes me up, and I just stop creating. So
Dude, I'm the same as you. All that resonates with me. I have an IP that I've worked on for so long, and then every other, once an idea is in your head, someone else is going to come out with it.
yeah, right.
So it's like you have to learn how to deal with that. Like, oh, they didn't even handle it well. They just spit out this garbage movie, and they didn't even handle that concept interestingly.
And now everyone's going to say you ripped off that thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you have to I find that like you just have to like find solace in like knowing that when you do it, if you do it better, people might still point to it, but I think it'll still resonate with people.
Yeah.
And if your themes and your storytelling still mean enough to you and resonate with enough people, it will be someone's first time watching that concept, and they will always love it.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, it's like the James Cameron Pocahontas thing, right? Like the Avatar. Yeah. It's just Pocahontas, but like they did it better. Like
yeah, and most people don't even. I mean, most non-artists don't know that it's just Pocahontas. They just took that whole concept.
Also, I saw that side-eye, Claire. You like Pocahontas more?
I like neither of those things.
Okay.
I don't like the white savior story that he comes in and he's the best Na'vi.
You don't like The Last Samurai? What?
Hey, but at least this one has dragons. That's all I'm there for.
That's fair. The creature design Avatar, gorgeous. Why don't the Na'vi have 6 arms, but otherwise?
Yeah, and also they have hair and nothing else does. Nah, there's problems. Yeah.
Ever come out? Who knows? No.
Yeah.
I mean...
So we're coming towards the end of the time we have on the panel. I think one thing that perhaps we should have addressed this earlier, but sometimes there's a perception that creating commercial work or working for a company is selling out. And I just want to hear your guys' take on that. How do you feel about this? Just like to have it as a goal, to have it as something you want to do.
And you got to eat, man.
I like that.
Nailed it.
Oh,
I don't know. When I was going to school when I was younger, I never thought that. I interacted with a lot of artists who would tell me that, and I started working 2 years into doing art. Like I just had a very super focus on getting jobs, super focus on doing well and excelling. But like I had friends who were like, mostly fine artists, usually ones whose egos were bigger than their skill, who would like look down at you for wanting to go to a studio or work on someone else's project. But I never thought so. I wanted to work, and I wanted to tell my own stories, and that working with people and gaining more skills from them I thought was the fastest way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, working at a company is just like second college, right? It's just like a learning experience. So you can take those skills and move them on to like, the stuff you actually want to do.
Totally.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like there's so much transparency now into how studios work and the individual artists behind these things that it's kind of really, it's destigmatized this idea of working for indie or larger companies over the past 10 to 15 years. So I feel like a lot of students coming up now understand that it's not selling out. We're just individuals trying to make cool things, and you can make cooler, bigger things with more people.
Absolutely.
I'm finding like right now in my career, I've worked with so many super talented people in like movies and TV shows and stuff like that. But like I'm really, really interested in these like young YouTubers who have like storytime animations who are just killing it, doing their own original stuff, just doing an awesome job, building their own little communities and businesses. I love that. That's where I'm trying to go. Is go back to like the older goal, which is fun.
I think that's a really great way to look at it, sort of an amalgamation of what all you guys said, is that like a paid opportunity and a paid place to work is an opportunity to learn from people who are so good they get paid to do it. Mm-hmm. Or like to take on a challenge that's difficult enough that it requires payment to attempt. So I think the stigma there should be lessened a bit, right?
Yeah. I also will bring this up too. Like you deal a lot early. A lot of us early on deal with like the imposter syndrome, especially when you get there and you're starting to work with like some of the most talented artists in the world, like at Lucas or something like that. And you're like, oh, they're gonna find out I'm not that good soon, and you like have to like deal with your own those pressures internally. But you'll find out if you talk about it with your friends that almost everyone's feeling the exact same way. Like
Yep.
you all are kind of feeling that pressure and that worry that you're not as good as you think you are, and it's just really good to talk about it.
Yeah, we actually did a whole panel on mental health and imposter syndrome last year. It's something that's really pervasive in the creative industry.
Boy, is it. And it stops you from being creative, which sucks.
Yeah, yeah.
It's paralyzing.
And the best way to not do it is personal work. That'll get you out of your imposter. Oh, God, I'm just trying to tap. Well, guys, look, that was a great chat. Thank you so much for your answers. They were really insightful and honest, and I really appreciate the chat. So I just want to thank my panelists, Claire Hummel, RJ Palmer, and DJ Welch. Guys, you were wonderful. Any closing remarks, words of wisdom you'd like to throw into the void?
Draw shit you like to draw.
RJ's
that
both of us
said, wherever.
So we're keeping our PG rating.
Plus one to that, just find ways to keep that passion when you're going to school and you're learning like those traditional drawings, and make sure you're actually listening to your teacher, because flexing those new muscles is good and it'll only enhance your personal projects.
Yep.
Well said. Guys, this has been DeviantArt's personal work to paid work panel. Guys, thank you very much. Appreciate you. Stay safe out there, everyone.